Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our session titled Return of the Brahmin. The discussion on Ravi Shankar Etteth's latest novel, The Return of the Brahmin. Ravi Shankar works as consulting editor with the New Indian Express. He is also the author of 5 novels. And Ravi Shankar will be in conversation with our Bangalore-based poet and author, Ms. Nandita Bose. Welcome you, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome, Ravi.
All right, thank you so much.
So nobody can read 2 pages of your book without saying that there is, a deep passion for history.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you tell us a little about where that love story began and what history means to you today?
See, for me, history is a way to understand mankind, and why people do what they do, in the sense that what makes a tyrant, what makes a prophet, I mean, what makes people follow people, some who deserve to be followed. Many times I see, human beings as lemmings, they're rushing to the sea and they just kind of, there's no logic. I mean, and why would, for example, somebody follow Hitler? At the same time, why would somebody follow Jesus or the Buddha? And what are the consequences of those actions? Which is what has made empires and empires rise and fall, both in the modern times and in ancient times. So the record, the footprint men have left behind on the sands of time. That is, whether it be rulers, whether it be writers, whether it be critics, whether it be warriors or women, or I mean, history is actually a desert through which people keep passing. And once in a while they find an oasis where they can drink from. And as far as I'm concerned, those are oases of collective memory. And they quench their thirst, and then they revive, and they find identification in what is gone. And many times the markers of what has happened is what's going to happen tomorrow. Because I think mankind is a continuous work in progress. I mean, it's a continuous work in progress, and it's cyclical. So what I don't believe, it's like karma, I don't believe that anything really original has happened, because everything which happens in history, everything which happens in time, everything which happens in countries, in laboratories, in classrooms, in a writer's cabin, in a warrior's kind of wargaming room, or a corporate concept, corporate board meeting, everything has happened in some form or the other. I mean, it's only today I read that the autopilot was invented over 100 years ago. But today, nothing has changed really very much, if you really think about it. Persecution, history; discovery, history; creation, history; love, romance, power. Because essentially, what is history? History is mankind's story of attaining power. Power is essentially what binds relationships. I mean, you can say, I may be cynical, but you can say that it's love. Yes, love exercises a kind of power. The power, prophet has over his followers. It's based on love, right? A power which a tyrant or a dictator, or has over his followers is to bring out the worst in them and to kind of redeem themselves with cruelty, because, I mean, that's their idea of themselves. So everything, I think, history is the story of power, as far as I'm concerned.
So before we lose a lot of viewers and even the few that have come to the room for our session, let me just tell you the next part about your history fixation, which is that this is not a lesson on history as much as it is a thriller.
Right.
Written thriller. I can't rave enough about your first chapter, where I breathlessly read through, all the action, which typically we watch on Netflix, but I have never seen somebody recreate that in writing that well, So this is a thriller. And what made you talk about history, not in a pedantic way, but to put it, out there for the masses in the form of a thriller, which really entertains and, which teaches a lot through entertainment?
Right. I don't claim to be a classical writer. I don't claim to be a literary writer, right? I wrote one literary novel which did very well. That was, I think, 2002 or something. After that, I prefer crime and I prefer thrillers because there is an element of mystery which is always interesting. I mean, it intrigues me. And you can't write a good thriller unless you're intrigued by the plot itself, you know. So how do you, of late, if you look at it, history is being made accessible. Started with, I think the first time I read was this Alice Albania, the journeys through the Indus. It was a fantastic book because it treated history in a very accessible manner. I mean, like in a travelogue. William Dalrymple's topics he addresses, the way he approaches is kind of accessible. Like history is supposed to be, the whole concept of history, like Toynbee and all that, is supposed to be heavy, right? It reminds me of textbooks in college or class which you really didn't want to kind of go through because they're all names and dates and, so and so came through this pass and so kind of, conquered this. I mean, it's more than that, right? Because history is people. So the modern historian today, I think, brings out a lot of the person in the subjects. This kind of personal angle to it. I mean, you can almost see the guy. So I thought, history is being packaged as almost like theater. I forget the name of the guy. I think Walt Isaacson. I don't remember who wrote that book on how the Renaissance was shaped by three people. Cesare Borgia was the warrior, Leonardo da Vinci who was the inventor, and Machiavelli who was the diplomat and the. So I find that the way history is being done is being packaged in an accessible form. Now, thriller is a form I really like, and I like to experiment. So I said, why not do a record of what interested me about ancient India into a thriller form? So people do pick up. So I keep getting asked, I mean, did they really eat that, or did they really wear that? Some of it, you see, the thing is that some of it is consequential. I mean, it's not. I have no proof that Ashoka ate one particular meal or so and so wore this particular clothes. It's partly, but not entirely. So you have to make history interesting. How do you make it interesting? In my view, I made it interesting by, writing a thriller, a historical thriller, which acquired a momentum of its own, a velocity of its own. So that is why I wrote it as in the thriller form. And the first book worked, so I got on the second. So it seems to be working. I'm still getting some money out of it. I am getting royalties out of it. I must be doing something right. So I rest my case.
Okay, so this is a basic question, but I do want to hear your answer. Why Ashoka and why the times of Ashoka? I'm sure the man intrigues you as much as he intrigues all of us, but I want to know that.
Okay. See, Ashoka was the first emperor of India, or the subcontinent. The concept of India as it's known today did not exist then. Ashoka was the first emperor who used religion in politics to hold complete sway over the nation, right? He was the guy who, for him, as far as I think, the more I read about it, the more I think about it, Ashoka used Buddhism as a weapon to unite his empire, to expand his empire, right? Now think about it. Do you think a guy who was known as a black prince, before he became the king, purely because of his savagery, do you think a king who built the Palace of Hell, which was the most beautiful building in Pataliputra, but was the torture chamber of the king, right? And look at the sadism involved. Look at the hypocrisy of evil involved, right? You are looking at Ashoka who murdered his 99 stepbrothers and, tricked the brother who was the anointed king or the king who was supposed to be the successor into a burning pit. A man who seized the throne, a man who overheard one of his concubines saying that Ashoka had a skin disease. So concubines saying that I really can't bear touching him, and he sent his entire harem to be tortured and killed. Then you see this king. Do you really think a man like that who was invaded, who's been at war, who's essentially a very cruel man? All kings are cruel men. That's the only way they can rule. Who is actually a guy who would suddenly see 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 dead corpses on a battlefield and say, shit, man, I'm going to be a good guy now. And it's not possible, right? It's just not possible. And what proved my point was that I started doing further research. and found that even after his conversion to Buddhism, he had invaded I mean, what is now Bengal, that side of Bengal. Because he was a Buddhist, and for him, Buddhism was his religion as well as his politics. So he had to kind of, he had to rule the entire nation, his entire empire through Buddhism. So what does he do? There is a small sect called Ajivikas, who did not go along with the Buddhist philosophy. They're a very small sect. They believe that everything happens in this world. Life exists in this world alone. There's no after life. There's no karma which comes and haunts you like Buddhism and Hinduism says, in your next birth or the next birth. Nothing. I mean, it ends here and it begins here and ends here. Now, this is against Buddhist belief. So Ashoka began to persecute those guys and he actually massacred them. He took his army to the east and massacred them. This is after he became a Buddhist, the conscience-driven Buddhist. I mean, he's an emperor, he's a ruler. Rulers are not nice guys. So, he is, think about it. As I told you before, I've always believed that's violence and the greed for power that drives history. And there's a lot of violence around these days, abuse of state power, murder of innocents. And a new conquest is sweeping the world, I think. And I was thinking of, solutions to these situations, because history always throws up one, maybe immediately, maybe later. I mean, like there was a JP after the emergency, or, there was Robespierre, after the French Revolution, but sometimes it's it takes a long time. Now, it's like, for example, Gandhi, who's the poster boy of ethics and nonviolence. I mean, I believe in the current situation, the current kind of situation is become irrelevant. So now, I can't imagine that if, for example, if thousands and thousands of people challenge the police and say, okay, if backbeat me up or shoot me, I'm not going to move. That's not going to happen today, right? I mean, it won't happen today. So, for example, Rahul Gandhi goes on a fast, or, somebody else who's an opponent of Putin goes on a fast. It's not going to work. So you need a new idiom. You need a new kind of, a thing. So Ashoka, how was Ashoka, why was there no resistance to it? That is one thought which kind of struck me. Because today, it's how the state uses religion to promote a particular cultural view, which is exactly what Ashoka did. And it was not a cultural view which existed at that particular time. I mean, there was no Magadhan cultural view, there's no Magadhan worldview which Ashoka had kind of, promoted. And, as I said, this is not about what is right, what is wrong. I mean, as I said, it's a cyclical work in progress. So, I found that the good guy, Ashoka, was actually a Buddhist construct. After all, most of our history has been written by white men or inspired by them after Persians and Arabs. And Ashoka, if you remember, was not really well known before. For that, I forget the name, that captain, one of the British explorers discovered the Cape, and it was he, or the Brits who actually created the entire vision of the great Ashoka, the great penitent. And sure, there must have been. There isn't enough evidence. There's not enough, historical evidence, because whatever is there was from the tablets, and they were written by Ashoka. So the victor writes history, right? And the irony is that the Ashoka Chakra, the symbol of one of the most cruelest tyrants in history, is the symbol of this nation. I mean, it shows the amazing ignorance of the creators of modern India to actually do something like that. I mean, this may sound very controversial. It is controversial to others, but this is what I see. So that is my reason why I chose Ashoka.
Ravi, do you have a passage you would like to read out to us right now?
Let me think. Yeah, actually, I had kept one which was very. Okay, this is where Ashoka sends the Brahmin to Ashoka. In this particular book, has obviously a lot of enemies. There is this mysterious villain called the Khantapati who wants to kind of kill Ashoka or capture him, etc. And there is a prince has gone missing. And, I mean, there is this kind of this monsters who keep appearing and disappearing and, massacring Ashoka's citizens. And, he's really worried. I mean, he's really stressed. So that's when he sends a Brahmin out to kind of solve the whole problem. So he says, a day and a night had passed, but there was no sight of him being the Brahmin. Ashoka is thinking. He hadn't caught the Khandapati. Mahendra was still missing. Fear gripped Ashoka. Was the Buddha angry with him? Was the holy war a mistake? Because Ashoka declares war on the Abjivkas who have run away from persecution. So he has declared holy war on them. It sounds familiar, right? I mean, that's happening. I mean, jihad is happening all across the world that they're calling it holy war. Was the holy war a mistake? No, it could not be. He killed in the Buddha's name, and the heretics had it coming. Now, this is what a lot of people do. I mean, people who are, they kill in God's name because they think that it gives them salvation. Like, you blow up so many people, you go up to heaven, right? And, get 99 virgins. Other versions, not just Islam. But anyway, so he sprawled on his great bed and closed his eyes. A vision of battlefields filled the red darkness. Buildings on fire, bodies piled up on streets, and orphans wailing. A dead baby dangled from the tip of a spear. A great sob escaped Ashoka. Let this war in your name redeem me, Lord. He prayed. Only ending the war within his soul can redeem you, Ashoka. The voice of the master was filled with regret. You are my soul master. Do with me what you will. I cannot do with you what you won't do with yourself, son. The holy war is within us, and the holy war is within us, and we win only when we lose. Ashoka opened his eyes. There was nobody in the room. He cursed. His thirst for salvation could not be quenched until Magadha was whole. The voice and the vision were only his weakness speaking. So that is a paragraph which I think is relevant to this particular stream of discussion. So I chose to read that.
So, as a writer or, as just a person who reads books, one of the things I like is when, certain notions are stripped away for me,
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of gave me a huge shock because typically we talk about the War of Kalinga and this huge warrior who sees the destruction and lays down his arms and embraces this really calm Buddhism, and then he becomes the greatest emperor of all time. And you're like, what bullshit? He is a cruel man. That's just a construct. And, and so that part really sort of, I had to rethink my entire history, my entire knowledge of Ashoka and his history. So is somebody else saying this? Have you had historical proof? Is it something you deduced?
No, I read recently that Sanjeev Sanyal had done, demystification of Ashoka as not a nice guy. I haven't read the book. I just heard about it, or I read something about it. No, Sanjeev Sanyal has an ideological point of view, which obviously has influences debunking of a Buddhist king, which is not my intention. I mean, as I said, I just put two and two together and made five. One being a bit of speculation and logical, logical calculations about the time, what habits, etc. Yes, so I heard that Mr. Sanyal had written something, but I haven't read it. But that's a recent kind of thing.
I've come back to the thriller part of the book. Again, this book could not have been written by somebody who does not have a deep engagement with history. This is a book written by somebody who watches thrillers, who's read thrillers, and who's immersed in thrillers. So can you acquaint us with that side of you?
Well, when I was, I think, 11 years old, my father came and gave me all 2 hardbound volumes of War and Peace. And I think that was the particular point when I stopped reading, like classics. But I suppose I read a lot of them. And I used to read thrillers, but I was not that much of a thriller fan in my 30s. Then what happened was that when my first book was signed, then by Bloomsbury. And they said, we need a 2-book contract. And I have no clue what my second book is going to be. And I was in Palakkad, I was visiting, my folks. And there was no Wi-Fi, there was no internet, nothing in 2002. And it didn't exist. So in Palakkad it's really a one horse. It's not a big town, right? So I had to now think of something. I had to give a plot. So I just drove to the nearest internet cafe, and I just kind of wrote out a plot, which happened to be a thriller. So I had no previous thought about it. I hadn't kind of looked at how I'm going to write what is going to be my next book. It just came up like that, and it turned out to be a thriller. Then after that, I started getting hooked on thrillers. Now I read only thrillers. I read only thrillers and history. I don't read anything else.
That's interesting. This has nothing to do with your book, but I have to get it off my chest because I have you here. You are also a very gifted cartoonist. Why did you stop?
I don't think this is this is the time. This is not the times which really encourage political criticism. Let's put it that way. And I have no desire to get land from jail. I frankly speaking, I'm not a warrior of conscience. I'm a political cartoonist. And when it comes to a situation where you simply can't draw, it is not something. It's not that my paper has stopped me from drawing, or it's not that anybody told me not to do. But I myself was thinking that it is not. As I said, it's not the right atmosphere for political criticism, and I'm not a politician.
So I must tell you that you have fans who miss you as a cartoonist, and will bring out a book later, full of your cartoons, and we're waiting.
No, I miss drawing myself, but there's nothing I can do right now. I'm being very candid. I could be called a hypocrite or a coward or anything. I don't have a problem, but this is the truth.
Did you face any flack for the title of Brahmin in your book?
Yes, I don't actually, not really. Though I did get a lot of a series of nasty emails from a person even before the book came out, because that I was propagating Brahminism, and I was probably one of those Palakkad Brahmins Ayers who were kind of anti-downtrodden or anti-lower caste. I'm not even a Brahmin, so anyway, it doesn't matter. So that's the only thing I had. Otherwise, no. Right. Just show that Hindus are pretty tolerant and what's there.
So there are other forms of religion, like you do show the little bit of, I won't say Brahmins, but the priests, the Hindu priests who came into the plot, as well as, the Buddhists who tried to get Ashoka to take action in a certain way. You do show a lot of religion-based friction in your plot. Do you see any parallels with what's happening today? Do you think religions have always been at flashpoints?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Let me begin by addressing your first concern. Always, it's all over the world. Whether it be a tribe in Africa, whether it be even modern Saudi Arabia or the Islamic Emirates of the world, or like, for example, America, where you have the Christian church, which is very strong. The only counter to the king's power was from God, or the agents of God, who were the priests. So ever since kingdoms became an established and emperors became recognized figures of power. The Brahmins are the holy personalities of Hinduism, but the only counter to the king's power. So they wielded a lot of influence. Like, for example, like King Henry, when he wanted to he wanted to divorce, but the church didn't grant it. He started a new religion, right? So Ashoka, if you look at it, was an incredibly intelligent man. The guy was a genius. So what did he do? So Buddhism was just new. It needed patronage. It had no previous baggage. It in essence, it took a lot from Hinduism in terms of karma and in terms of so he found it, it was quite adaptable to his psyche, or the national psyche, or whatever at the time. At the same time, giving them power made them a good, balance the power, religious power equation in court. So that's what it did. So, and the result was, look at it. I mean, there's a million, I mean, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 centuries where Buddhism really flourished in courts, in universities, everywhere. I mean, like, it really flourished. So that was what Ashoka, even today, the Dalits, they look to Buddha as their, as their savior or their, to worship. So that is the impact which Buddhism has brought into this country by Ashoka, as a balance to Hindu power. Hindu power, I don't mean like Hindu power of citizens, but power of Hindu priesthood. So that is what he did. And that's what continued.
So, when I had to, before I even got this gig, I had to review your book, right?
Yeah.
When I reviewed your book, like this must be 4 or 5 months ago, I remember knowing that the Brahmin was, an ancient James Bond. That's he was so accomplished in so many ways, and he was of course the country's top intelligence officer, and you could call him spy, you could call him what you will. He wielded a lot of power as well, and you have been able to etch him out. Even his network of spies, he had various kinds of people, including beautiful Apsara women, who were his spy network. So a fabulous, character of the Brahmin. Do you have any favorite character in your book? And do they all listen to you, or did they develop lives of their own while you were writing?
Interesting you should say that. I mean, I'm obviously, very, 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 very well about psychic writer. Yes. Many of the new characters in the book popped up from nowhere. I don't know where they came from. My favorite character is Empress Sandhimitra, because I think she's a very powerful woman. And like I think this whole the history of power is extremely misogynistic. Very, very misogynistic. I mean, the most powerful queens and the most powerful female rulers never get the kind of importance which is equal to the, or the king. It's basically, so I think very powerful women. Sandhimitra was, this fellow was great love, Ashoka's. And I mean, she had a lot of say in court, in matters of court and all that. And I find her a very, very fascinating person. And she's my favorite character. But let's see what happens next in the next book.
I will end with one small question. Mm-hmm. So, volume 3 in the offing, what next for you?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about one more Brahmin book. I haven't reached anywhere. I mean, I haven't started writing it. I mean, I don't plan. It's not that I take a piece of paper and start writing on it and all that. No, I haven't done it. But it just somewhere at the back of my mind, it's started kind of whispering and nudging. So let's see what comes out of it. Well, I think most people have left, so it's okay. The rest is remain backbenchers like me.
Yeah, I have a loyal husband in the background, but that's a good. Is anybody interested in asking a question, or shall I ask him to read some more? Questions, anybody?
No.
Perhaps you could end with a short reading, because this is going to be also taped and it'll go out to a lot of people.
But I don't know what to read. I didn't kind of choose anything in particular. Okay. Let's start at the beginning, all right? Which is the introduction to the Brahmin. The baby-faced scout who stole into the inn did not notice the stranger at first, but he felt a prickle at the back of his neck that called to his deepest fears. He would tell his lover later, while quaffing glasses of rice wine and spiced cucumber, that he had felt the presence of a panther in the room. The scout had got separated from his fellow soldiers when they were attacked in the forest by bandits. He was a poacher's son who had grown up in the foothills of Mount Pandim in Magadha's northeast mountain ranges, which teemed with predators and game. When the larder at home was empty, father and son would set off on their nocturnal hunts, quieter than the animals they hunted, and quieter still than the ones that hunted them. There were two customers at the inn, a dandy at a table by the door drinking Medaka, a rice beer loved in Magadha, and a girl who seemed to be a traveler, judging by her clothes. The hood of her cloak hid her features. She kept her head low and eyes on a plate, taking dainty bites of food between sips of buttermilk. Her hands were dark and slender, with a large ruby on the finger. A valley stood at her feet. Then just to go back to as if sensing the scout's scrutiny, shadows parted as the stranger raised his head. He looked at the scout squarely in the face with eyes in which winter had made its home. The stranger's gaze brought to the scout thoughts of ageless trees, moss-speckled boulders wet with the spray of waterfalls, the cry of a hunting hawk, and the silent bulk of a panther blacker than night. The scout was no coward, but he felt a shiver run down his spine. He had his cloak around himself in spite of the fire blazing in the stone brazier, warming the surkhy floor of burnt clay and lime. Now, this is the introduction to the Brahmin, and you talked about the action thing, right? Not receiving a reply, the bandit chief pulled out his sword and lunged. One moment, the stranger was sitting quietly watching the scene, and the next he had risen and lifted the oak table and brought it crashing down on the bandit chief's head, splattering his brains on the ground and onto his comrades' uniforms. This is a bit gory. They stood frozen for an extended moment, staring at the scene with unbelieving eyes. Then steel rasped in scabbards as they drew the swords, all of them experienced fighters who had participated in the Kalinga War before becoming mercenaries and bandits. Confident of the prowess, they rushed at the stranger with blood-curdling screams. It was a battlefield tactic that seasoned fighters used to frighten their enemies. In this case, however, their intended victim wasn't frightened at all. He held a great broadsword. Nobody had seen him draw it. He stepped forward and brought it up at an angle, allowing the lead soldier's blade to slide down all the way to the hilt. Steel met steel and sparks flew. Before the attacker had to recover his balance, the stranger smashed his sword's pommel down on the man's head, pulverizing his skull. Even before the bandit's body hit the ground, the stranger, his arm extended, elbow locked, swerved aside to allow two of the dead man's partners to stumble through the suddenly empty space. So, I tried my best to create to bring action as a, like what you see on the screen, make it possibly as a cartoonist. A strong visual element helped me, the visual idiom or the visual grammar I was familiar with, helped me to, in writing the book.
Right. It is very evident, at least in the first chapter, it just comes through brilliantly. Thank you so much, Ravi Shankar, for joining.
Very, very enjoyable chat with you.